In the heart of the prestigious community of Greenwich, Connecticut, the river's residence had been a symbol of stability and refinement for years. It stood proudly among the stately homes that lined Round Hill Road, known for its elegant architecture and manicured gardens. The river's sisters, Victoria and Claire, were fixtures of the neighborhood, admired for their intelligence, charm, and the unshakable bond they shared. Victoria, the elder by 3 years, was a poised and ambitious corporate lawyer, with sharp features and an even sharper wit. Her success in the legal field had earned her a reputation as one of the most formidable attorneys in the state. Claire, on the other hand, was a free-spirited interior designer whose easy charm and infectious laughter provided a perfect counterbalance to Victoria's intensity. Together, they were a formidable pair, admired and envied in equal measure by those around them. But the delicate equilibrium of Greenwich was destined to be shattered by the arrival of one man. Ethan Blackwood, with his enigmatic smile and air of worldly sophistication, moved into the long, vacant house next door to the rivers on a warm June evening. Little did the residents of Greenwich know this would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in tragedy, forever altering the fabric of their peaceful community. As the summer heat intensified, so too did the rivalry between Victoria and Claire, their once unbreakable sisterly bond corroding under the acid of jealousy and desire. What began as playful competition would soon spiral into a deadly game, with Ethan as the unwitting prize and Greenwich as the stage for a chilling tale of betrayal. The Rivers family had deep roots in Greenwich, tracing back several generations to the town's founding. Their parents had raised their daughters, Victoria and Claire, with a blend of old money, refinement, and new age philosophies, resulting in 2 remarkably different, yet equally captivating young women. Victoria Rivers seemed destined for greatness from her first breath, inheriting her father's sharp intellect and her mother's unyielding determination. By the age of 35, she had already made partner at one of New York's most prestigious law firms, her name whispered with a mixture of admiration and trepidation in boardrooms across the state. Victoria's life was a carefully constructed edifice of achievements and accolades. Her wardrobe consisted of impeccably tailored suits, her social calendar was filled with charity galas and networking events, and her romantic entanglements were as brief as they were calculated. To the outside world, Victoria Rivers was the very picture of success, but those closest to her sensed an underlying current of discontent, a hunger that no professional triumph seemed able to satisfy. In contrast, Claire Rivers burst into the world on a midsummer's night, her arrival heralded by a spectacular thunderstorm. From childhood, Claire possessed an ethereal quality that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her laughter could lighten the heaviest of hearts, and her art, vibrant, emotive interior designs that seemed to capture the very essence of joy, adorned homes and offices throughout the region. 32, Claire's life was a kaleidoscope of color and sensation. She flitted from one passion project to another, leaving a trail of half-finished masterpieces and broken hearts in her wake. Where Victoria was all sharp angles and cool precision, Claire was soft curves and warm impulse. Her bohemian style and carefree attitude were at odds with Greenwich's conservative leanings, yet somehow, she made it work, charming even the most staid neighbors with her genuine warmth and infectious enthusiasm. Despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, Victoria and Claire had always been inseparable. They balanced each other, with Victoria providing the stability and focus that Claire sometimes lacked, while Claire brought a spark of spontaneity to Victoria's regimented existence. Their sisterly bond seemed unbreakable, a fact that made the events to come all the more shocking to those who knew them. As children, they had been co-conspirators in backyard adventures and shared confidants in teenage trials. As adults, they remained each other's fiercest defenders and most trusted allies. Neither sister could have imagined that anything or anyone could ever come between them. Fate seemed at other plans. The arrival of Ethan Blackwood in Greenwich was like a stone cast into still waters, sending ripples of curiosity and excitement through the community. He appeared one day in early June, driving a sleek black Mercedes that purred down Round Hill Road with feline grace. As he emerged from the car, the neighborhood watch. Group of retirees who spent their days cataloging the comings and goings of Greenwich from their porch swings, leaned forward in unison, eager for a glimpse of their new neighbor. Ethan did not disappoint. 36, cut a striking figure. There was something almost cinematic about his presence, as if he had stepped out of a noir film and into the technicolor world of Greenwich. Rumors about Ethan's past spread through the community like wildfire. Some said he was a tech millionaire taking a sabbatical from Silicon Valley. Others whispered that he was a novelist seeking inspiration for his next bestseller. Truth, as it turned out, was equally intriguing. Ethan Blackwood was a former war correspondent turned humanitarian aid worker who had spent the last decade hopscotching across global hotspots. Greenwich, he claimed, was to be his refuge, place to heal and write his memoirs. The Rivers sisters first encountered Ethan separately, each meeting leaving an indelible impression. Victoria, out for her morning run, nearly collided with him as he emerged from the local coffee shop. Their eyes met over the rim of his steaming cup. For a moment, Victoria felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Claire's introduction came later that same day as she was selecting fabrics at a local boutique. Ethan, out exploring his new surroundings, stopped to admire her choices. His insightful comments on color and texture left Claire both flattered and intrigued. Neither sister realized, as they recounted their encounters over dinner that night, that they had just met the man who would change their lives forever. The seeds of rivalry between Victoria and Claire were planted innocuously enough, nurtured by the subtle competition that had always existed between them. At first, their growing interest in Ethan manifested in small ways. Victoria began taking her morning runs past his house with increasing frequency, while Claire found reasons to visit the boutique near his regular walking route. As summer progressed, both sisters found themselves unconsciously vying for Ethan's attention. Victoria, typically reserved in social situations, made an effort to engage Ethan in intellectual discourse whenever they crossed paths. She regaled him with tales of her most challenging cases, her gray eyes alight with passion as she detailed the intricacies of corporate law. Ethan, to her delight, proved to be an attentive and insightful listener, often drawing parallels between her legal battles and the geopolitical conflicts he had witnessed. Claire, meanwhile, approached Ethan with her characteristic warmth and spontaneity. She invited him to local art exhibitions, introducing him to Greenwich's small but vibrant creative community. On lazy Sunday afternoons, she would often spot him reading on his porch and would bound over, design sketches in hand, to share her latest inspirations, or to coax him into giving his opinion on her work. Ethan, for his part, seemed to genuinely enjoy the company of both sisters, oblivious to the growing tension between them. He found in Victoria a kindred intellectual spirit, someone who could match his wit and challenge his perspectives. With Claire, he rediscovered a sense of joy and wonder that years of witnessing human suffering nearly extinguished. The rivalry might have remained friendly, mere undercurrent in the sisters' relationship, had it not been for the annual Greenwich Summer Gala. The event, a black tie affair held at the town's historic Putnam Cottage, was the social highlight of the season. Victoria and Claire had always attended together, a united front amidst Greenwich's elite. This year, however, each sister extended a separate invitation to Ethan. When he arrived at the gala, looking dashing in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the Rivers sisters' faces fell in unison. He greeted them both warmly, seemingly unaware of the silent battle of wills taking place before him. As the evening progressed, Victoria and Claire took turns monopolizing Ethan's attention, each trying to outshine the other. Victoria dazzled him with her knowledge of vintage wines, guiding him through a tasting with the expertise of a seasoned sommelier. Not to be outdone, Claire swept Ethan onto the dance floor, her natural grace making even his awkward steps seem charming. By the end of the night, palpable tension had settled between the sisters as they watched Ethan drive away, each lost in her own thoughts. They realized that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The easy camaraderie they had always shared was now tinged with an edge of competition. A silent acknowledgement that they had become rivals in the pursuit of Ethan Blackwood's affection. As summer gave way to autumn, the rivalry between Victoria and Claire intensified, their every interaction with Ethan becoming a calculated move in an increasingly complex game. The sisters, once inseparable, now found reasons to spend time apart, each hoping to encounter Ethan alone. Victoria, ever the strategist, began orchestrating chance meetings with Ethan. She adjusted her schedule to coincide with his daily routines, casually bumping into him at the local farmer's market or the quaint bookstore on Greenwich Avenue. During these encounters, she would engage him in deep conversations about his experiences in war-torn countries, drawing parallels to her own battles in the courtroom. Victoria's keen intellect and sophisticated charm seemed to resonate with Ethan, and she reveled in the moments when his eyes would light up with interest at her insight. Claire, intuiting her sister's maneuverings, countered with her own brand of seduction. She invited Ethan to impromptu picnics in Bruce Park, her basket filled with homemade delicacies that showcased her culinary skills. Under the dappled shade of oak trees, she would regale him with vivid stories of her travels through Europe's art scenes, her animated gestures and melodious laughter, a stark contrast to Victoria's reserved demeanor. Claire's free spirit and zest for life seemed to awaken something in Ethan, a yearning for the simple joys he had forgone in his years of global wandering. Competition between the sisters began to spill over into other aspects of their lives. Victoria, who had always been career-focused, suddenly took an interest in community events, volunteering for the same charitable causes that Ethan supported. Claire, typically content with her bohemian lifestyle, started talking about getting her designs into more prestigious galleries, knowing that Ethan appreciated ambition. Their friends and neighbors in Greenwich watched this transformation with a mixture of fascination and concern. The once harmonious Rivers sisters were now prone to thinly veiled barbs and one-upmanship, their interactions charged with an undercurrent of rivalry that was impossible to ignore. The situation came to a head at the Greenwich Fall Festival. Both sisters had been involved in organizing the event, each hoping to impress Ethan with their community spirit. Victoria had meticulously planned the logistics, ensuring every detail was perfect. Claire had taken charge of the artistic elements, designing beautiful decorations that transformed the town square into a harvest wonderland. As Ethan strolled through the festival, complimenting both sisters on their hard work, Victoria and Claire flanked him on either side, each vying for his attention. When he admired a particularly striking centerpiece, Claire quickly claimed credit, shooting a triumphant glance at Victoria. In retaliation, Victoria smoothly steered the conversation towards the event's flawless execution, subtly highlighting her own contributions. The tension between them built throughout the evening, culminating in a heated argument behind the catering tent. Their raised voices drew concerned looks from passers-by, and even Ethan, finally noticing the strain between the sisters, tempted to intervene. His presence only served to fuel their anger, each accusing the other of trying to monopolize his time. As the festival wound down, Victoria and Claire departed separately, their usual joint ride home abandoned. Ethan was left standing alone, a puzzled expression on his face, as he began to realize the depth of the conflict he had inadvertently sparked between the Rivers sisters. The watershed moment in the sisters' rivalry came on a crisp October evening during Greenwich's annual charity auction. The event, held in the grand ballroom of the Greenwich Country Club, was a glittering affair that drew the town's most prominent citizens. Victoria and Claire arrived separately, each a vision in designer evening wear, their eyes scanning the crowd for a glimpse of Ethan. When Ethan finally appeared, looking debonair, in a classic black tuxedo, both sisters made their move. They converged on him from opposite sides of the room, their forced smiles barely concealing their competitive intent. Ethan, now acutely aware of the tension between them, tempted to greet both equally, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken hostility. As the auction began, Victoria and Claire found themselves locked in a silent bidding war. The item up for bid was a weekend getaway for two at an exclusive mountain resort, an opportunity that both sisters saw as a chance to spend uninterrupted time with Ethan. The bidding started reasonably, but quickly escalated as Victoria and Claire raised their paddles with increasing frequency. The other attendees watched in astonishment as the price soared well beyond the package's value. Ethan, realizing the bid was more about him than the prize, tried to intervene, but his protest fell on deaf ears. The sisters were too engrossed in their competition to heed his discomfort. In the end, it was Claire who won the bid, her final offer eliciting a collective gasp from the crowd. As the auctioneer's gavel fell, Claire turned to Victoria with a triumphant smirk, only to find her sister's face a mask of cold fury. Victoria, typically the picture of composure, was visibly shaking with rage. In that moment, something shifted in Victoria's eyes, hardening, a darkness that sent a chill down Claire's spine. Without a word, Victoria turned on her heel and strode out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of whispers in her path. Ethan, witnessing this exchange, finally grasped the full extent of the sisters' rivalry. He approached Claire, his face etched with concern, and gently suggested that perhaps it would be best if he kept his distance from both of them for a while. Claire, her victory suddenly hollow, could only nod mutely as she watched him walk away. As the evening drew to a close, the residents of Greenwich buzzed with speculation about the Rivers sisters' very public falling out. Little did they know that this was merely the prelude to a much darker chapter in the sisters' story. In the days following the charity auction, Victoria retreated into herself, her usual routines abandoned in favor of long hours spent alone in her home office. To the outside world, it appeared that she was merely nursing her wounded pride. But within the confines of her mind, a sinister plan was taking shape. Victoria had always prided herself on her self-control, her ability to compartmentalize emotions and approach problems with cool logic. But the humiliation of losing to Claire, coupled with the fear of losing Ethan, had cracked her carefully constructed facade. For the first time in her life, Victoria found herself entertaining thoughts that both thrilled and terrified her. At first, these thoughts were relatively innocuous, visions of Claire falling ill or encountering some minor misfortune that would keep her away from Ethan. But as the days wore on, fueled by sleepless nights and an increasing sense of desperation, Victoria's imagination took a darker turn. She began to contemplate scenarios in which Claire was permanently removed from the equation. These thoughts, initially shocking in their intensity, gradually became more palatable as Victoria's mind worked to justify them. She convinced herself that Claire had always been the favored sister, the one who effortlessly captured attention and affection, while Victoria had to work tirelessly for every scrap of recognition. In her distorted reasoning, Victoria began to see Claire not just as a rival for Ethan's affections, but as the embodiment of everything she had ever resented in life. Every setback, every disappointment, every moment of self-doubt, Victoria now attributed them all to Claire's mere existence. Hey crime case solvers! Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and if you have any thoughts about this case, or have a case of your own you would like us to investigate, leave us a comment. Stay safe, crime case solvers. The turning point came on a rain-soaked evening, as Victoria sat in her darkened living room, a glass of wine in hand. Through the window she caught sight of Claire and Ethan sharing an umbrella as they walked down the street, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. Something snapped inside Victoria at that moment, the last vestiges of sisterly affection crumbling away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was then that the idea of an accident first took root in Victoria's mind, an unfortunate incident that would rid her of Claire once and for all, leaving the path to Ethan clear. As lightning illuminated the room, Victoria allowed herself a small, chilling smile. She was, after all, an expert in constructing airtight cases. Surely she could craft the perfect crime. With the decision made, Victoria threw herself into planning with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her such a formidable lawyer. She approached the task of eliminating her sister, the clinical detachment of a chess player, plotting several moves ahead. Her first step was to establish an alibi. Victoria began to cultivate a more visible presence in the community, volunteering at the local animal shelter and joining a book club. She made a point of being seen and heard, creating a network of witnesses who could vouch for her whereabouts and character. Simultaneously, she embarked on a careful study of Claire's routines. Under the guise of reconciliation, Victoria began to spend more time with her sister, noting her habits, her schedule, and most importantly, her vulnerabilities. She paid particular attention to Claire's daily jog through Greenwich Point Park, a solitary ritual that Claire had maintained for years. Victoria's research extended beyond her sister. She spent hours poring over medical journals and forensic reports, learning about accidents that could appear natural, yet be orchestrated. She became an expert in the effects of various substances, their detectability, and their ability to mimic natural causes of death. To cover her tracks, Victoria used public computers at the local library to conduct her more questionable searches, always careful to clear the browsing history afterward. She made discreet purchases from different stores across town, accumulating the material she would need without raising suspicion. As her plan crystallized, Victoria encountered several close calls that threatened to derail her scheme. Once, while she was mixing a concoction in her garage, a neighbor dropped by unexpectedly. Victoria managed to conceal her work just in time, her heart pounding as she chatted casually over coffee. Another time, Claire nearly discovered a notebook where Victoria had jotted down some incriminating notes. Victoria managed to snatch it away, passing it off as a draft for a sensitive legal case. The incident served as a stark reminder of the need for absolute caution. Despite these near misses, Victoria's resolve never wavered. If anything, the close calls only served to sharpen her focus and refine her plan. She became adept at maintaining a facade of normalcy, playing the role of the dutiful sister and respected community member while secretly orchestrating Claire's demise. As weeks turned into months, Victoria's plan evolved into an intricately woven tapestry of deception and calculation. Every detail was accounted for, every possibility considered and recalculated. In her mind, it was no longer a question of if she would act, but when. The opportunity Victoria had been waiting for finally presented itself on the eve of Greenwich's annual marathon, an event in which Claire had enthusiastically participated for years. With a sense of grim satisfaction, Victoria realized that the stage was set for her carefully choreographed accident to unfold. The morning of the Greenwich Marathon dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for running. Victoria woke early, her nerves humming with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She went through her morning routine with mechanical precision, each action carefully planned to establish her alibi. At 7:30 a.m., Victoria arrived at the marathon starting line, clipboard in hand. She had volunteered as a race coordinator months ago, securing herself a visible role in the day's events. She greeted fellow volunteers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her gaze constantly scanning the growing crowd for a glimpse of Claire. Claire arrived at 8:15 a.m., waving enthusiastically at Victoria, any lingering tension between them seemingly forgotten in the pre-race atmosphere. Victoria waved back, her stomach churning as she thought of what was to come. As Claire warmed up, Victoria made her way to the water station at the 5-mile mark, where she had been assigned to distribute refreshments to the runners. This position was crucial to her plan. It allowed her to be seen by numerous witnesses, while still giving her access to the race route. The starting gun fired at 9 a.m. sharp. Victoria watched the sea of runners surge forward, her eyes fixed on Claire's retreating form. Then, with a deep breath, she turned her attention to her duties, handing out cups of water with mechanical efficiency. At 9:47 a.m., Victoria excused herself, citing a need for a bathroom break. Instead, she hurried to a secluded spot along the race route, just before a sharp turn that led into a wooded area. Here, she retrieved a small vial from her pocket and carefully spread its contents. A nearly invisible, highly slippery substance across a patch of the path. Returning to her post, Victoria resumed her role, her heart racing as she awaited Claire's approach. At 10:23 a.m., she spotted her sister rounding the bend toward the water station. Claire was making good time, her face set in determination as she reached for a cup. Their eyes met for a brief moment as Victoria handed Claire the water. In that instant, a flicker of doubt passed through Victoria's mind, a last vestige of sisterly affection, crying out in protest. But it was too late to turn back now. Claire continued on, oblivious to what lay ahead. Victoria watched, her breath caught in her throat, as her sister approached the treacherous patch of ground. Time seemed to slow as Claire's foot made contact with the slippery surface. The accident unfolded exactly as Victoria had planned. Claire's foot slid, her ankle twisting at an unnatural angle. Her momentum carried her forward, sending her careening off the path and down a steep embankment. The sound of breaking branches and a muffled cry echoed through the woods, followed by an ominous silence. For a moment, Victoria stood frozen, the reality of what she had done crashing over her. Then, snapping back to her senses, she raised the alarm. Anguished cries for help, convincingly real. Fellow volunteers and paramedics rushed to the scene. Victoria played the part of the distraught sister to perfection, her eyes brimming with tears that were not entirely feigned. As Claire's motionless form was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, Victoria felt a strange mix of horror and relief. The deed was done. Now all that remained was to see her plan through to its bitter end. The news of Claire Rivers' tragic accident sent shockwaves through Greenwich. The vibrant interior designer, beloved by many, had suffered severe head trauma and multiple fractures in her fall. She lingered in a coma for 3 days before succumbing to her injuries, leaving the community in mourning and disbelief. The initial investigation into Claire's death was cursory, given the public nature of the event and the presence of numerous witnesses. The police were inclined to view it as a tragic accident. Victoria's performance as the grief-stricken sister was flawless, her composed exterior cracking just enough to reveal glimpses of raw emotion that seemed genuine to all who saw her. In the days following Claire's funeral, a somber affair attended by what seemed like the entire town, Victoria threw herself into managing her sister's estate. She handled the tasks with her usual efficiency, all the while playing the role of the bereaved sibling, perfection. But the first thread in Victoria's carefully woven tapestry of deception came loose 6 months after Claire's death. Emily Harper, a junior associate at Victoria's law firm, was tasked with organizing old case files when she stumbled upon a peculiar notebook hidden among Victoria's papers. Curiosity piqued. Emily flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she realized the sinister nature of its content. The notebook contained detailed notes on various poisons and their effects, along with what appeared to be a meticulously planned timeline. While no names were mentioned, the final date corresponded chillingly with the day of Claire's fatal accident. Unsure of what to do with this information, Emily confided in her boyfriend, Detective Michael Grant. Grant, a by-the-book officer who had always felt uneasy about the quick resolution of Claire's case, saw this as an opportunity to reopen the investigation. He began by quietly re-examining the evidence, paying particular attention to details that had been overlooked in the initial inquiry. A breakthrough came when Grant interviewed Martin Holloway, a retired chemist who lived near the accident site. Holloway recalled seeing Victoria near the wooded area shortly before Claire's fall, despite Victoria's insistence that she had been at the water station the entire time. This discrepancy, coupled with the suspicious notebook, was enough for Grant to dig deeper. As the investigation progressed, more inconsistencies in Victoria's story came to light. Security camera footage from a nearby convenience store showed Victoria purchasing unusual combinations of chemicals in the weeks leading up to the marathon. Forensic re-examination of Claire's running shoes revealed traces of an artificial polymer designed to reduce friction, a substance that had no business being on a running trail. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, Ethan Blackwood. Racked with guilt over his role in the sisters' rivalry, Ethan came forward with a series of text messages from Victoria. The messages, sent in the heat of their competition for his affections, revealed a level of animosity toward Claire that bordered on obsession. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the true picture of what had transpired on that fateful day began to emerge. Victoria's carefully constructed alibi began to crumble under the weight of mounting evidence. The final nail in the coffin came during a search of Victoria's home office. Hidden behind a false panel in her desk, detectives discovered a vial containing traces of the same polymer found on Claire's shoes, along with a series of detailed notes outlining the plan to stage an accident during the marathon. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against her, Victoria's composure finally shattered. In a moment of desperation, she attempted to flee, leading police on a tense car chase through the streets of Greenwich. The pursuit ended at the very spot where Claire had fallen, with Victoria's car skidding off the road in a cruel twist of irony. As she was led away in handcuffs, the mask of the grieving sister fell away completely. The residents of Greenwich watched in shock as Victoria Rivers, once a pillar of their community, was revealed to be the architect of her own sister's demise. The arrest and subsequent confession of Victoria Rivers sent shockwaves through Greenwich, shattering the town's idyllic image and forcing its residents to confront the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of their community. The courtroom drama unfolded like a twisted mirror image of Victoria's legal career, with the once respected lawyer now sitting at the defendant's table. Her impassioned plea of temporary insanity, citing the extreme emotional stress of her rivalry with Claire, fell on deaf ears. The jury, comprised of many who had once admired her, took less than a day to return a guilty verdict. Victoria was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell, sealing Victoria's fate, the residents of Greenwich could only wonder how two sisters who had once been so close could be torn apart by jealousy and ambition. The Rivers family home, once a symbol of stability and refinement, now stood as a stark reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Tragedy that would haunt the community for years to come.